dive into this amazing conversation today with one of our top companies in the world. So before we do that, I'm going to introduce our speakers. For today's first guest, she is the Vice President of Global Diversity, Equity, Inclusion for the Boeing Company. In this role, she is responsible for developing and executing the company's global strategy on diversity and inclusion, building equity into the company's systems, and catalyzing a culture where every teammate feels valued, respected, and inspired. She has nearly 20 years of experience in employment law, diversity and inclusion, human resource management, and equal opportunity practices. A native of Northeastern Wisconsin, she earned her Bachelor of Science degree from Northwestern University and her law degree from Stanford Law School, and resides in the Seattle metro area. Please join me in welcoming Vice President of Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Boeing Company, Sara Bowen. Thanks for being here today, Sara.
Thanks so much, Shelby. It's a pleasure.
Nice. And our leader for today's discussion, an Aussie-turned New Yorker who coined the term NeuroLeadership when he co-founded NLI over 2 decades ago. With a professional doctorate, 4 successful books under his name, and a multitude of bylines ranging from the Harvard Business Review to the New York Times and many more, a warm welcome as I pass the virtual mic to the co-founder and CEO of the NeuroLeadership Institute, Dr. David Rock. Off to you, David.
Thanks so much, Shelby. Thanks for your warm welcome and all the incredible work putting this program together. We're so excited to be able to dig in. And Sara, thank you so much for being willing to come back so soon. You presented in the closing session at the summit, along with the CEO of Procter & Gamble and the CFO of Avanade, and your session brought up so many questions for people, and it was such a hit. We got so much feedback from it that we wanted to go deeper than the kind of 10 or 15 minutes we had. So those of you who were watching that session, you'll get a chance to kind of really dig a lot deeper and understand the initiative as well. So I really appreciate you being willing to come back quickly and kind of dive deeper, Sara. Thanks so much.
Thank you, David. It is a true pleasure not only to be here with you today and have this conversation, but it is the biggest privilege of my life to be able to lead this work. So thank you.
That's great. It's let's before we dig in, for those new to the podcast or today's webinar or NLI overall, just a little context. We're a research-driven leadership institute. Our vision is making organizations more human through science, and our mission is change in weeks, not years. And as you'll hear with the Boeing case, this is probably one of the best examples of that happening in real life. And we'll hear just how that was done. The heart of our work is research. We do original research, over 50 research papers that look at the biological foundations of different talent challenges. And where this project came from, as Sara will talk about, is research we did on creating a culture of speaking up over 2 or 3 years. And then we launched out into the world. And then Boeing is one of the organizations that's then applying this. We do a lot of research. We then advise organizations and help them drive change. We're now up to over 60%, the Fortune 100, and we're very, very much a global practice. So let's dig in. Sara, maybe let's start at the beginning. I know we covered some of this in the summit, but lots weren't there. Just, tell us how this project came about. Obviously, pretty much everyone's aware of the real challenges that was happening in the organization, but how did this come about, and kind of what was the initial spark of this?
Yeah, it's a great question, David, and the context in which it arose is important to this journey. So travel back in time to 2019, Boeing had just experienced 2 fatal crashes of our MAX airplanes, and the company was, to say in a state of crisis is an understatement. We were facing the most intense scrutiny, both from outside the company and inside the company, warranted scrutiny, asking ourselves questions that we couldn't answer. Questions like, do people here feel safe to speak up? If not, why not? What is driving the fear? And how do we rebuild the most important currency we have, and that is trust, not only with our external stakeholders, but our internal stakeholders. And it was with this in mind that I had the pleasure of attending the NeuroLeadership Institute Summit in New York City in November of 2019, along with a couple colleagues of mine. And we were sitting through the session on Speak Up, the session that NLI calls Voice. And we looked at each other during that session. All of us had this twinkle in our eyes, and we thought, this is it. There is something here. We need to bring this back to Boeing. And so we brought this back. We began socializing it with our stakeholder groups. And we kept hearing one piece of feedback consistently across these groups. Can you guess what that feedback was, David?
How do we make sure it feels like Boeing or looks like Boeing, or would be one idea, or it sounds too simple? I don't know. What was it?
We did hear some of that, but the primary piece of feedback we heard was speaking up isn't the issue.
Oh.
It's listening. It's listening. And if people feel safe that they will be listened to when they speak up, they will speak up, but it's that listening muscle we need to build. And, of course, that makes sense, right? Because speaking up is the natural consequence of feeling like the people around you care about what you have to say. And so we sort of transitioned to this model of speak up and listen. We were getting a lot of positive feedback on that, especially with the simplicity of the model and the brain science. And then I set up a meeting with our new CEO. He'd been in the role for about 3 months. And I wanted to pitch him on what I believed was going to be the most important and foundational culture move we could make. And so I pitched him on this speak up and listen, and he listened very intently. And at the end of my pitch, he said, "This is really important. I can get behind this, but there's one thing I want to add." He said, "It's this notion of my leaders not just listening when they're spoken to, but actually going to those pockets of anxiety, those pockets where employees are feeling distressed, and going there and learning what it is we need to learn to get better and smarter." He said, "I want that in the DNA of every single one of my leaders. Call it what you want, but to me, it's seeking out those pockets of anxiety." And in that moment, Seek, Speak, and Listen was conceived. It really is this Seek part of it that I think truly distinguishes this culture effort from so many others.
Interesting. Let me just give people a little context, and I'll share screen again to kind of bring this alive so you can see the habits on screen now: seek, speak, and listen. So at NLI, we're in the whole company culture change business. We're passionate about helping organizations change in weeks, not years, in whatever way matters. And DEI focused initiatives are a big part of what we do, but we're also in a number of other areas. And for us, the approach we have to company change is really different than you might see out there. So we're not about kind of give your top leaders a deep, experience so that the top of the house changes. We're not a training company where we want to train 10% or 20% of your company in some new skills over time or one-off. The way we think about it is, firstly, in terms of 3 big kinds of work you've got to do. You've got to set a clear set of priorities and make those as sticky and memorable and simple as possible. And you've done a great job with this. Seek, Speak, and Listen is really sticky, memorable. That's the first thing. So you've got to build a set of priorities, but then you've got to do the work to build real habits. And this is where most companies fail to create culture change. In fact, about 3/4 of the reason culture changes fail is the company didn't build habits. People just didn't change what they were doing, despite being clear about how they should change. They didn't. And then the third step is systems. So priorities, habits, and systems. We haven't done much systems work with you guys. I expect a lot of it will happen internally over the next few years. But we helped you build a set of priorities, which is Seek, Speak, and Listen, based on our off-the-shelf solution called Voice, but customized or kind of tailored to your language and your experience. But the way we did it is we executed this habit activation strategy based on the science of really building habits and scaled that to 140,000 people. So before we talk about the scaling, let's talk a little bit about the habits: Seek, Speak, and Listen. Imagine someone knows nothing about that or voice research. Can you bring it alive for us? Like, what were people learning around Seek, Speak, and Listen? Maybe one at a time. What were you learning if you're learning this kind of Seek habit? Bring it alive for folks if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so when I think about Seek, I immediately go to a story that a senior leader shared with me. He said we were working on recertification with the FAA, and he was sitting in a room of engineers, And he was asking, okay, are we on plan? You know, what do we need to do to hit these deadlines, and how's it going? And he said everyone in the room was looking really tense. No one was making eye contact. They were all kind of looking down, right? If you're in a status quo kind of a passive mindset, you look at your team and say, okay, well, you know, get to it, you know, let me know how it's going, and you walk out of the room. But the seek mindset stops. It notices the moment that people in this room are not comfortable, that there's some anxiety brewing. And the leader in that moment will say, you know, hey, David, what am I missing here? What's bothering you about this? What can we do better? What are we missing? Right? Asking those questions. And this leader shared this story about asking each of the folks in the room, and slowly but surely he drew them out, and he learned that they felt there was no way on earth they could hit the deadline, and they were experiencing extreme anxiety. And so the leader in that moment was able to say, okay, we're going to go back and we're going to tell them we need more time, because we have to do this right. We have to do it with quality every step of the way. So I think that's just such a wonderful example of that seeking muscle, right? It's pausing, getting a little uncomfortable, noticing that moment and navigating through it. You know, that's a very relevant example to business, but it also applies, you know, in the diversity and inclusion space. Seeking out those uncomfortable conversations, seeking out the different perspectives, looking around your team and saying, what viewpoint or perspective are we not hearing, and then going and finding it, right? Because, you know, as the chart says, because awareness can teach us and help us improve. And if we're in the business of continuous improvement, which we say we are, then this is the most important habit we can exercise. So that's seek. A bit of a long story there on seek, but I think it's really important. Right. And then, you know, speak is what I love the work we did with NLI on speak, because it's not just, hey, speak up to raise a concern or speak up to raise an idea. It's speak up because you may have thought of something that no one else has. And by speaking up, you're doing the right thing for your team. And I love that so much, because it's so empowering, especially for people who maybe, you know, have brought up not to be the loudest voice in the room, or to, you know, to listen before speaking. But if you put them in the mindset of, I'm speaking up for the benefit of my team as a demonstration of care and innovation, that's why I do this. It's incredibly empowering, and it's very, very effective. And then listen, not listening to respond. I think, David, you and I have talked about this a little bit, that a lot of people listen and they're formulating their response, but setting that aside and truly listening with curiosity, because that's when we learn, and that's what enables us to take constructive action. So that's a little background of the 3 habits.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, you know, the one of the things I've loved about collaborating with Boeing is you guys really respect science, and, you know, you're hungry for data and research-based things. And so we're able to kind of do our best work with you, you know, all those engineers and people who think, you know, care deeply about science, or, you know, hungry. So, you know, what we're not going to talk about here is, you know, there's a deep scientific explanation of why you need to seek, and then how to do it properly in each of the modules. So think of these as 3 separate habits. They weave together, but we taught these like one at a time to people. So, you know, in the seek module, people are learning about why you need to seek, and how you need to seek. And our goal in designing this experience is giving people the strongest possible insight, which creates the really strong motivation. And we do that combining the science and the storytelling in the content. So there's kind of a body of content for seek, a body of content for speak, a body for listen, and they're actually taught over time in that way. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of how that was done? Like if I was a participant, like how did I experience this in time and space? And then we'll get into sort of some of the stories of what happened when it hit people. But how would I have experienced this in time and space? Because this, you know, this went out to 140,000 people in how long? It was like 140,000 people hit
1 month, 30 days.
1 month, right? Yeah. 30 days, right? Changing weeks, not years. So how, if I was a participant over that month, what was I experiencing?
Yes. So this is one of the most brilliant things about this, and why I think it's been so effective, is that we did this together as a one Boeing team over the course of 30 days. So week 1, all teams went through Seek. We had the modules, the learning, the team interaction, the if-then planning. We really dove into that Seek habit in week 1. Week 2 was Speak, video, team discussion, and week 3 was Listen. Week 4, teams brought it all together with an action plan of how they were going to put these habits into practice. In every country where Boeing has teammates around the globe, we did this together. That social learning, that reinforcement, the peer reinforcement across the enterprise was really important for the habit formation. I will also add that, we have a large manufacturing and production workforce, people who are working on the shop floor, they're not sitting behind computers. And so we worked with NLI on a parallel module that didn't involve any technology. They were discussions that teams were able to have in their daily stand-up to build these habits in the same way, 1 habit per week for 3 weeks, and then a capstone at the end. So that's how we rolled it out, and it's a really brilliant model.
So essentially, to bring this alive, if you were, a frontline, if you were an employee, this is a sort of average example, your manager would have said, hey, we've got this initiative coming out. I want you to watch this video, and then we're going to talk about this at our next team meeting. And so the managers were given a guide like how to talk about it. And so, everyone watched this video of just Seek and covering like the science and the practice of why you need to do this and how to do it well. Very focused video. It's only about 5 minutes, but it's incredibly focused on generating insight. And so people would watch this on their own or together in the meeting, and then the manager would have this discussion about it. Now, the interesting thing about that is research shows that one of the most important factors of why people do something is they think everyone else is doing it. And so knowing your whole team was doing this, but also knowing the whole company was doing this in the same month has this tremendous momentum that it creates, right? It shows this is a priority for the company, that everyone is doing this, right? So it's very light on one level. On one level, it's very, very light. Like people are just literally watching a 5-minute video and then having a discussion with their manager. What's not obvious is just how powerful that is when you do it at once and when you do it with your team, and then you do it every week for a month. And this is what we found. So, can you speak to that a little bit? Just kind of bring that alive a little bit more for folks. What was that like for the employees?
Yeah, it's incredible because, like you said, now everyone is working from the same score, or singing from the same score, and we started to see people in meetings or in one-on-one saying, "Hey, I have a Seek, Speak, and Listen moment I'd like to share." Right? They're using it as a frame to be able to share a concern or an idea where they didn't have that frame just last week, right? But because they frame it up as Seek, Speak, Listen, everyone in the room understands, oh, these are the habits that we've all been talking about across the enterprise that everyone has said are going to be, really important to evolving our culture. So I think the learning together simultaneously in that quick sprint model is absolutely the way to go. I'm a huge fan of that model. Very, very effective across the globe. And then, after those 30 days, many teams we saw spending, some additional time, like our teammates in Asia, dedicated a separate week to really go through this together and bring it to life for their regions, their teams, and within their culture. These habits, this is the beautiful thing about these habits, is that they are so universal and they can be so easily customized to the needs of that particular team or the culture in which the team sits.
Right. Now, there's some great questions coming in. I'll make sure we get to some of those. I'll answer a couple of the tactical things now, but I want to give people a really good sense of what really happened for folks. And I think it's really strange, and I'll show you the data in a minute on just how much change this happened. But it's amazing how much real change you can happen when you follow the science of giving a little bit to everyone at the same time. Like giving a little bit that's actionable, like a few key habits that everyone can do, and giving this to everyone at the same time creates a huge momentum. And so it's not really training, it's a culture change initiative. And literally, like, it doesn't matter how busy people are, we're asking them to watch a 5-minute video, and then as part of an existing meeting, have a conversation. So this was like May
Yep.
2021. This was an incredibly tense time. This was some of the dark days of the pandemic. And people were overwhelmed, but still they participated fully, because it's not us. We're not saying, hey, go on to do hours of training, take time off.
Right.
This is really light. Now, for us, I mean, we worked for 2.5 years to work out the habits that make the biggest difference to create a culture of speaking up. So there's a lot of science to make it this simple. It's not just like, hey, you could just go and work something out, roll it out. Like, you've got to give people the fewest possible habits, and you've got to give them the right habits. And then the really hard job is, what's the exact research that creates the strongest insight to get people to seek? Like, what's the science that really inspires and moves people to see that they have to seek, right? And what's the story? What are the stories? And in this case, we used a lot of Boeing stories. What are the stories that really inspire people to want to seek, right? So it's the rational and the conceptual. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes to make this work, but ultimately what ends up happening is you really can create change in weeks, not years, across an entire company. Let's go to the data and talk a little bit about sort of how we collected the data, and then we can come back to sort of the design a bit. But I think it's good to show people just sort of how much this moved folks. Talk to the slide.
Yeah, so we do a quarterly pulse to a statistically significant set of our workforce every quarter on the Seek, Speak, and Listen habits. I think it's 8 questions long, maybe it's 10 questions long. And so we're tracking this over time. So 85% of our teammates say that they use the Seek, Speak, and Listen habits in their day-to-day interactions. 85%.
Oh.
When it comes to speaking up, 74% of our teammates say that they feel comfortable speaking up. Now, would we like this number to be 100? Of course, right? And it's it takes time to truly embed the habits and change the culture. 74% is where we are now, and we're going to keep working at it. Southeast Asia, I mentioned they set aside a separate week to really lean into these habits. They saw a 31-point increase in teammates' comfort speaking up. I get a chill every time I revisit this.
Wow.
Because just think about all the teammates who were holding things in, whether it was a concern or a brilliant idea that was being locked inside. And these habits are helping unlock that. So a 31-point increase in Southeast Asia. In India, a 14-point increase. When it came to seeking new perspectives, so getting out of your comfort zone, going out and seeking different perspectives, Southeast Asia, 24-point increase in comfort, and across Europe, Russia, and Israel, 15-point increase. So really, really dramatic change as a result of going through these habits.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And then,
sorry, you go.
I was just going to say 2.4 million employee engagements with the content, which demonstrates to us that there's something about it that really resonates with people. They're drawn to it. They're drawn to the simplicity and the stickiness and the meaning behind the habits.
Right. 2.4 million engagements. And you've got 140,000 people roughly. So everyone is like engaging like 20 times on average with the content in different ways. And we actually only asked them to engage 4 times. In theory, they should have just downloaded stuff and kind of interacted 4 times, but they've actually engaged about on average 20 times. That's fantastic. So, and a lot of that comes back to, we realize at NLI, we realize people are overwhelmed and busy, and, our goal is the shortest distance to insight, to the strongest possible insight. So our goal when we're designing this kind of work is what's the fastest way to give people the strongest insight? And when you design for insight like that, people like have these useful insights and they want the next piece and they want the next piece and they want the next piece. So it's not like, and this wasn't mandatory, right? There was nothing here that we said you have to go through this. This was all about making it compelling.
Yes.
So speak to us a little bit how that was done, how it was rolled out, how it was launched.
Yeah. Well, so I was just going to say 96% of our teammates have gone through it. And it wasn't mandatory. 96%. It was highly encouraged. It was an expectation that people learn these habits. It came from the very top. Our CEO is the biggest champion of these habits. Our CHRO is all of our senior leaders are really big champions of these habits, and that makes a huge difference, as you know. Sorry, what question was I supposed to answer here, David?
My brain is completely fried, because you just told me 96% of the company, and it's like 140,000 people engaged with this content.
Yeah.
That's an exceptional result. It's actually the highest result we've ever seen. We'd seen a 94% before, but 96% of people engaged with this content across 140,000 people, and it's totally not mandatory.
Right.
It was how did you get to that? How did you roll it out? Like, what was done strategically that kind of made 96% of people want to do this?
Yeah, well, I think it's, our CEO championed it, and he put out the first video kind of introducing the habits and why they're important. And remember, our company is in a state of crisis when we're rolling this out. So not only did we have the MAX accidents, but then COVID hit and the entire industry kind of collapsed. So we're all looking around saying, what do we do? How do we make ourselves better, stronger, smarter? How do we rebuild trust? These are the questions we're asking ourselves every single day. So when this is offered up to us, people want to be successful. People want to see our companies, thriving and being on top again. So I think people are also hungry for something that is meaningful. And you just said something, David, that I think is really important and really true of these habits, which is there's a reward system built into them from the get-go, right? So the moment you actually engage in listening in the way it's intended to be, you learn something. It might be a small thing, it might be a big thing, but you learn something that's going to make you more effective, make your team more successful. The example I gave about the leader who's in the room with the people wringing their hands about the FAA deadline, right? That conversation led to a really important decision to extend the deadline, which meant that we were able to deliver with the quality standard we set for ourselves. That is there's no more important outcome than that. So what I love about these habits is that they do appeal to our better nature, right? And I think that is its own reward system. So when I speak up, I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. When I'm listening to my colleague, I'm engaged in an act of care. And when I seek, that might lead to something that could save a life. And those, it's just so powerful. I love that it appeals to our better nature and that there's this inherent reward system built into these habits. And I believe in the goodness of people. And I think people are drawn to the things that make them better and that make the organization stronger as a whole. And these habits do that.
Yeah, no, it's great. My brain is reeling. We've done a lot of research over the years and done a session on like this on one of the Fridays. It should be a podcast on how you shift from kind of mandatory to compelling in any kind of change initiative. And for us, it's really important that something is super compelling. And one of the things I love about what you guys did is you followed all our advice on how to make it compelling. And we did pretty much everything we've always said you should do. So one thing is, your CEO launching it. That's something we always try to do. You guys did that. We built on our existing videos and tools and guides from our voice solution, which some companies just use as is, but we actually highly tailored it. So we had videos of engineers working on airplanes, and we had Boeing stories. So we used our something that we spent years researching and building, but then we really tailored it so it felt exactly like Boeing, which is much better than trying to build a completely new solution. And then you guys did really good work in kind of preparing people and kind of laying the land. So, it wasn't just some surprise when suddenly they were getting this content. So, you just did really good work around making something compelling, and, starts with a launch from the top, engaging top people. We've actually got data showing the percentage impact on habit activation when a top team is briefed first. And so, the top team was engaged first. It also tied into, real business issues. So, in many ways, you could think this is a DEI initiative, diversity, equity, inclusion, but actually it was so tied to business imperatives and so driven by top leaders that it was really just like, this is how we need to work now. So I think it was positioned really well. So, you guys just took a lot of really good, research and applied it in how you focus on compelling. not mandatory.
Yes.
And I know there's a few comments on this, how do you make sure this works if it's not mandatory? Well, what we see with mandatory, when you do mandatory training, a huge swathe of people just switch off because it feels like they're being forced to do something. We wrote a piece on this, maybe one of my team will put in the chat, there's a whole piece we wrote on, mandatory training can literally make people more biased. It's terrible. So it's a whole body of work, and my team can put in the chat like some of the work we've done on sort of how you make things compelling, but we've got a really strong point of view on that. But Sarah, speaking of compelling, when we spoke about this earlier, you were telling me some of the stories. I mean, I'm not sure which ones you're comfortable sharing, but some of the stories of just, how people were different. And you told a great one already, but just some of the stories to bring it alive for folks of what did it look like when people were seeking, speaking, and listening, and what are some of the stories that you saw or heard, and share some of that with us.
Yeah. So one of the things we did is we stood up a Seek, Speak, and Listen website internally, and we have a Seek, Speak, and Listen moments section where teammates can go in and just share their experience with these habits and what insight they gained from it. And there are hundreds, David, literally hundreds of stories that teammates are sharing. Some are really powerful. They range from I spoke up about this thing that was happening on my team that made me feel excluded to one person said, I wrote this down because I found it so moving. Someone in our Boeing Defense and Space organization said, Seek, Speak, and Listen made me feel as though my opinion actually meant something. It was the first time I felt that in a long time. Story after story like that. And again, I think because this is at scale, right? This is 140,000 people. And if we're unlocking people's sense of empowerment to share their ideas and thoughts, to speak up when they see something that isn't right, that is such powerful change. I'm thinking of other examples. People would put Seek, Speak, and Listen idea boxes in their work sites and let people submit ideas. Nice. There's just people have gotten so creative with Seek, Speak, and Listen because they really see it as a way of continuously improving. It's wonderful.
There's a lot. It's interesting. Seek. When you get people to activate this habit of seek, what you're doing is you're actually reducing bias, for example, because you're telling people, some of the deeper research says, you only ever see one slice of reality. If you're a lawyer, you see the lawyer's slice of reality. If you're a marketing person, you see the marketing person's slice of reality. Really different slices of reality, and you've really got to seek out other people's perspectives to be able to make good decisions. So it's creating this pull for people to want to learn from others, which is activating more of a growth mindset. It's mitigating bias. It's getting people to really, lean in. The speak is about speaking up and really sharing your perspectives. And then the listening obviously is a super powerful, critical thing. So there's a lot of kind of hidden science and habits under this. We won't go into all of the habits in here, but essentially, and as someone was saying in the chat, this isn't really a D&I initiative. It wasn't launched as one, but it has a huge impact on DEI. This is really a culture change. Can you speak to that a little bit? It's sort of like a Trojan horse for DEI, but it's not framed.
It is. Yes. And that's exactly the term we have used internally. I am the diversity, equity, and inclusion leader for the company, but I was also the leader of this. Right. And at the time we launched it, this is what we needed. I mean, because these habits, when you think about what they're doing, these are the foundation of inclusion, these habits. They are the tools for allyship, right? Imagine trying to build allies if we don't have the basic habits of seeking and listening and speaking up effectively. I mean, those are the habits of allyship. So it has been a Trojan horse for inclusion, right? Sometimes you go into teams and you say, okay, we're gonna turn you all into allies. You get a little bit of resistance sometimes, or you say we're launching this big diversity initiative, especially in the midst of crisis. It doesn't always go over that well. But these habits, which are really driven to help everyone learn build awareness, voice, have voice that's meaningful, it affects everything. And some of the stats that we didn't put on that slide, but that I'll share here, is that close to 80% of our teammates when surveyed have said that the habits are helping them achieve better business outcomes. Close to 80% say habits help them achieve better outcomes, help their teams collaborate, right? So that's an inclusion thing, collaboration. And then thirdly, identify issues before they become problems. And that one to me is like, it makes my heart explode, because that's what these are designed for. And I'll tell you, there was some, because I'm the diversity leader, I engage in a lot of conversations with like our business resource groups and different groups around the company. There was some fear when we started to roll this out. People kind of saying, like looking around like, does the company really mean it? Like, do they really want to hear, what my experience has been? Right. Am I really supposed to speak up? And like, do I tell the whole truth or only part of the truth? And I was talking with a mentee of mine earlier today, actually, and he said, when we were going through Seek, Speak, and Listen, his manager, he's a Black male and his manager is a white male. And he said his manager came to him and said, hey, have I ever said anything or done anything that has felt to you like bias or microaggression? And the guy said, do you really want to hear the answer to that? And the leader said, yes, I really, really do. And they had this open conversation that they probably would not have had but for Seek, Speak, and Listen. And that manager went on to create some of the most diverse teams at the company. He read White Fragility. He's done all this work now on himself, right? And is now a huge champion of diversity and inclusion, who might not have gotten there through a traditional diversity program, but who got there because of Seek, Speak, and Listen and the courage of teammates to share their experience.
Yeah, that's super powerful. Thanks for sharing that story. I think the stories really, help bring this alive. A lot of people are kind of wondering how you get to 96%. How do you get to, how do you get to people engaging with, 20 times with this content that's completely not mandatory? And, honestly, the answer is you think about it very, very hard for 24 years. That's what we've been doing. We're in the business of change at scale and, changing weeks, not years. So I could talk for 2 days about everything that goes into making something compelling. But, at high level, it's like, give a lot of people a few simple things to do, one at a time, all at the same time, and make sure these things are the most helpful things you could possibly do, right? And make sure you have an incredibly rational, clear explanation for why they're the most important things you should do, right? And treat people as adults and say, hey, and give them one thing to do. Go and try this one thing, and then give the people who want more ability to go deeper and deeper and deeper. There's deeper research under this if they want it. So I think for us, it's like, tie it to the business, get the top team to launch it, give people the fewest possible things to do that really make a difference, give them really clear, rational explanations of why they should do these things, do it across teams, led by managers, not training, and then, measure this. And that's, this is one of our best case studies of kind of really doing culture change right. Now, it doesn't mean it's perfect, doesn't mean there's not more work to do, but, we can see really meaningful change in the habits people are applying weekly. And I think one of the things we're so moved by is what can happen when you think about habits and just focus on changing those habits. And that's our work. Someone was sort of asking about that. And I think, I go back to this, like, change initiatives fail because just people don't change. And when I look at any change initiative, it's really obvious to me exactly why people didn't change, because, they just didn't describe the fewest possible habits. They described 10, right? Or 5, or they just weren't clear, or they didn't explain rationally, or they didn't do it one at a time. There's like 1,000 ways to fail at creating culture change. But I think, you guys followed the research in really good ways. So anyway, that's my rant there.
Well, and I think too, David, so some of the reasons habit change or culture change fails is because you're asking people to change, but you're not changing the system structures and processes in which they work. And I have the great privilege of having the program lead for Seek, Speak, and Listen on my team, Corinne Wolcott, is genius at ensuring integration and systemic change that integrates the Seek, Speak, and Listen habits. So we didn't just roll out habits and ask people to adopt them. We also, changed the way we onboard new talent. We changed our performance enablement. We embedded Seek, Speak, and Listen into the One Boeing production system, right? All of these places so that wherever you turn, whether it's explicit or not, you're seeing Seek, Speak, and Listen come to life. And that's also, why people kept going back to the Seek, Speak, and Listen website to engage with the materials, because again, I give credit to Corinne, continuing to innovate meaningful, relevant tools that people could use to improve the way they work, right? It's that, like I said before, it's immediate reward system, because when you go to it and you get the tool and you put it to use, you get a better result. Who doesn't want that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's giving people something they can use easily that will work. So just to go back to PHS, priorities, habits, systems, you create a set of priorities that are really sticky and memorable. You did the work to build the habits the way habits need to be built, which is just a few, one at a time in social situations. Because when you learn socially, you recall and embed the information much more richly, right? You did that over, a 30-day period, which is a good amount of time. But then also this work has been embedded into systems, as you were saying. So it's gone into the way you're hiring, the way you're giving feedback and all this stuff. Now you guys have done that without needing our help. Sometimes we come in and help with that, but it's sort of everyone in the company would start to see where changes need to be made to systems. When you realize how important it is to seek, information from others instead of assuming, you start weaving that into everything, everywhere. We had this, amazing piece of research launched at our summit 2 weeks ago, on kind of empathy and understanding others. And we had a session on the morning, I think it was the morning of day 2, somewhere in the summit, it's a blur now, on empathy. And we released a 2.5 years research for us on empathy. And empathy is made up of these 3 different parts. If you think of empathy as just accurately like understanding someone and responding adaptively, what we see is that there's an automatic part of empathy, which is just kind of mirroring and sensing. We call it noticing. There's the part where empathy goes wrong is what's called perspective taking, which is trying to understand other people. And then there's a third part, which is acting and doing something compassionate and helping people. But it's that middle stage of understanding people that people get wrong. And what's terrifying is this quote from the researcher we worked with, is that when you teach people to try to take a perspective, like when you teach people to actively try to understand people, they actually become more confident that they understand people, but not more accurate.
Oh, wow.
Right. Let me just say that again. When you teach people that, to understand people, you have to really take their perspective, and you encourage them and even train them to try to take perspective of the people, they actually become more confident that they understand people, but they're not more accurate at understanding people. And the punchline to that is what they've got to do is seek. What they've got to do is actually ask questions and not assume. They've actually got to seek information from people and not just assume. We'll be writing about this a lot and coming out. So, the whole campaign aligns with that research really beautifully, but it's not about just trying to understand people. It's actually about seeking their perspective and really, really leaning in. So kind of terrifying and exciting.
Yes, it is. It is.
Lots of questions about kind of, how this is integrating into the business and, all sorts of interesting questions. But let me turn it to you, Sara. What do you think, what's been some of the stories that sort of some of the most moving stories for you before we get tactical? Any other stories you'd like to share about kind of what the journey's been like for you personally, or, with your teams? Anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much, but I think one thing that comes up for me is these habits are not only the right thing to do to drive business outcomes, but they actually help us be more human to each other. every time we engage in the habit of seeking or listening or speaking up because it's the right thing to do, we're engaged in acts of care. And we're using the word care now at our company. We didn't use the word care when I joined. And that's a really important shift too, because the company is made up of its people, and we're bringing the human. I think we're bringing a lot of that human component back. We use Seek, Speak, and Listen during a really tough time with the vaccine mandate. You know, that for so many organizations, that was an incredibly hot and divisive topic. People were angry and frustrated and defensive and really didn't know how to talk about, you know, religious accommodations or medical accommodations or just fear of the vaccine itself. And so we put together a one-page Seek, Speak, and Listen discussion guide to help people navigate those tough discussions. And I'm not saying that solved everything, but at least it gave people some tools to navigate during a really, really challenging time. Our company is shifting to what we call a just culture. And just culture is it's kind of a term in the aviation industry, but also healthcare. It's about shifting from individual blame to really understanding root cause and continuous improvement. And Seek, Speak, and Listen is setting us up so beautifully for this transition to just culture. And I'm really excited about that because it's where we need to head. And now we have these foundational tools for it. But I mean, the stories are endless. Our executive council met a few months ago, and we had a one-page Seek tip sheet for leaders on how to seek, what questions to ask. We're making it very tactical and practical for these leaders. To end a meeting, before I end a meeting, if I haven't heard from David Rock, I'm going to pause and I'm going to say, hey, David, I really want to know what you think about this. What might I be missing, right?
Right.
It's not that hard, but it makes a huge difference. My boss, who's our CHRO, will call me up and say, hey, Sarah, how did I do in that presentation? What advice do you have for me? And it's so effective in building trust and connection, and is really leading people to have conversations that they might not have had before. And it's making us so much better and smarter. No,
thanks. That's fantastic. I want to kind of go back to something earlier about sort of the how you make this work and compelling. I was at Stanley Black & Decker a couple of years ago. We did some work with them, and they make all these tools and hardware and stuff. And they, I didn't know till I went there, but they release like over 1,000 new tools a year. I was like, how do you release 1,000 new tools? And how do you know which ones you should keep and throw out and all this stuff? And they said, oh, it's really simple. We just, the ones that are really valuable are the ones that people use every week. And so we just look, we just kind of mystery shop our different people using our tools, and we look for the ones that they're using a lot, and we invest more in those. And one of the things we know is that people use easy tools. They use tools that are easy, right?
Yes.
The easier something is, that the more people use it. And we had a whole session on this at the summit on fluency. We launched what we call the FACT model, which is fluency, amount, coherence, and time, which is a way of kind of working within cognitive capacity of people. And what ends up happening is that it's so easy to recall Seek, Speak, and Listen that it becomes the go-to tool that you keep on your belt and you use all the time. And this is something that organizations miss all the time in doing change, is that if you can make something so simple that people use it many times a week, that's when you start to win. And we had this, result at Microsoft, which, their framework was clarity, energy, success. That's what leaders need to do. So simple, easy to remember. But getting to simplicity is hard, as Mark Twain said, getting something simple is difficult. And also it can't be simple, but banal. There has to be, real reasons why you're choosing those things. They have to really make a difference. Anyone can come up with simple and banal. So it's fluency is a really, really important construct, and a really big part of how this stuff works. But you can't do fluency without your real validity, your biological validity. So we didn't just pluck these habits out of the air. It was 2.5 years of research to say these are the critical habits for creating a culture of speaking up. And we debated internally and externally with experts, literally for 2.5 years, to identify which habits really create a culture of speaking up. So there's a lot behind it. that I think is super important. A couple of last quick questions, Sara, then we'll let you go. A lot of people are asking about sort of accountability and measurement and this kind of stuff. And it's interesting. I see a lot of sort of the mandatory mindset coming in every time we talk about this stuff. Everything we've tried to do is sort of tried to be on the compelling side. But was there any processes that you did to sort of measure or create accountability or structure around this, or has it all been on the kind of more growth mindset side? Anything you can say to that?
Yeah, I do think it's a hybrid. And in fact, for 2021, we felt that Seek, Speak, and Listen was so important and so foundational to our future that it became the individual performance differentiator for our annual review cycle. And we didn't complexify it. We kept it really simple, but we did say to leaders, part of a person's evaluation is how well they embodied Seek, Speak, and Listen, the Seek, Speak, and Listen habits.
Wow.
So that has a very natural kind of forcing function. People want to be good at it when they know that they're going to be sort of evaluated on it. But really, I think it's that social pressure that you talked about, David, that it's coming from our CEO. Our CEO has roundtables with employees. They're called Seek, Speak, and Listen sessions. Our BU presidents do the same thing. So when your leaders are doing that, you better get on the train because it's going with or without you, right? So I think that social pressure has been really important. But yeah, I can't even tell you the hours we spent debating whether this should be, mandatory or not. But I think we ended in a really good place.
Yeah, at 96% and 2.4 million employee engagements, I think you made the right decision because those employee engagements were by choice, and people wanted to be there. If you could have done it mandatory, if I had to guess, you'd get literally a quarter of that, and a big chunk of those people would be annoyed.
Right.
So
yes.
It's a really interesting way to think about. One last question, is there any other data that you can share in terms of impact, like engagement scores or other metrics? Is there anything you've been tracking that you're able to share yet? It might be too soon, but anything you're able to share there?
Well, we are tracking a lot of things. We're also looking at how managers view their own Seek, Speak, and Listen versus individuals, and represented versus non-represented. So there's a lot in the mix. But overall, what we're seeing is that people continue to engage with the habits. They continue to say that the habits are helping them achieve their business outcomes, are helping them identify issues before they become problems. And there's a higher sense that their teammates care about them as people and care about their happiness. And I know it may sound soft or it may sound fluffy, but coming to a place of work where you feel cared for is, I think, is baseline for innovation, creativity, and teamwork. And those are the ingredients for success. So this work has been a gift, not only to work on as a leader, but just, we're so proud and so grateful to have done this work, partnered with NLI, to have had the leaders we've had to champion it, and to see the uptake from our teammates. So it's the highlight of my career, really, doing this work.
I'm getting shivers. That's amazing. I mean, I think the one take home is when your CEO starts doing Seek, Speak, and Listen sessions regularly, you've got something going. I think that's a great test of an initiative really working. Sara, I'm so thrilled that we made the decision to invite you back, and even more thrilled that you're able to make the time. Number of people said this is our best event ever. So I'm thrilled that you're able to, and thanks for bringing this alive for people. A couple of people are asking about kind of how do I understand the habits. This is based on our voice solution, which was based on 2.5 years of research on speaking up. Just put the word voice in the chat and we'll find you. Just put the word voice if you're interested. If you're from an organization and you're interested in learning more, someone will reach out to you. And I think it goes without saying, we should probably do a voice demo of the product itself in the next couple of weeks. So look out for a note on that. We'll do a demo webinar, just like specifically going through the habits and the research on voice, which is what this was based on. So you'll see that coming up, but just put voice in the chat and someone will follow up with you in the next week or so. Sara, thank you so much. The thing I want to thank you most for is for your willingness to follow the science. We we're in the business of whole company change, and we're so passionate about trying to find the right science, and we learn more every year, but we're just so honored and privileged to partner with an organization that was willing to really think deeply about the science and then act boldly. It's been an incredible initiative. I know we're doing a write-up soon. We're working together on that. So there will be something out in public where we can share some of this. At the moment, there's nothing public, although if you Google Seek, Speak, and Listen Boeing, you can see a bit of the stuff that's been put out by Boeing themselves. But there'll be a case study white paper coming out at some point soon. So Sarah, I'll let you jump off. I've got a couple of quick announcements. Folks, stay with me for another 30 seconds while Sarah jumped off, but just a huge thank you again for being with us. A couple of really quick things, folks. I want to tell you about a couple of big things happening. This is the first one. We have, if you're interested in the deeper science of this, we're launching a practitioner masterclass. So 6 months of research and practice and application on particularly DE&I first of all. So just put the word masterclass in the chat if this is of interest to you. We're launching it in a couple of months, but it's officially happening. It's a virtual program, online program, but synchronous with peers. You're going to have an opportunity to spend 6 months diving into our research on DEI and how you really launch this in an organization. So just put masterclass in and you'll see some more information about this coming out. We've also launched what we call an in-practice series. So we're going deeper on bias with an in-practice series. We'll go deeper on voice with an in-practice series. This is coming out as well. And we launched at our summit recently research on de-escalation, calm, the neuroscience of de-escalation, and also care, which is our work on empathy. So this is some new solutions coming out. So you can put calm or care or both in the chat, and someone will let you know about these things. So I think that's it for me. Just know that we're passionate about staying closely connected to folks. If you're from an organization passionate about our work, visit neuroleadership.com/insiders. Get connected. We have a session once a month with people who just want to talk about the research and brainstorm together. It's a great community. And then finally, we're hiring. You'll see neuroleadership.com careers, and you'll see all of this on our podcast as well, and some incredible past sessions too. I'll be talking a lot about the summit. Next year is the next big summit we're going to run, November 2023, both in New York and virtual. We'll do a parallel. So Shelby, I'm going to hand it back to you, let people get back. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here. Big thank you again to Sara, and take care of yourselves. Look after each other and keep doing what matters. We'll be on for another minute or two. Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much, David and Sara. Such an inspiring conversation. We're really looking forward to seeing the chat, and so many of you interested. We're really excited to get connected with you and share more information on that. Also, we have our poll. Let us know how we can help you in the future. And we just want to thank you for attending today. If you are here and sharing your comments and insights, that's what really drives us, and we appreciate it so much. So if you'd be willing, we are going to drop a link to the survey in the chat so that you can engage with us and share a little more of your insight. As David mentioned, we have our insider exchange that's going to be coming up. That's for more senior executives. If you enjoy this and you want an exclusive opportunity to work with us and look at new research, roundtable discussions, and other conversations, definitely apply to the link. We will drop that in as well as send it as a follow-up. And we're hiring. So if you are interested in joining our team, we would love to have you. Visit neuroleadership.com/careers to learn more about our open positions. And as David mentioned, we are already in the works of planning things for Summit 2023, so be on the lookout for that. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, you will love our podcast show that is going to recap this, as well as the season. We are starting to try some new formats, so be on the lookout for that too. But look for Your Brain at Work wherever you enjoy listening to your podcast. And finally, this is where we say farewell. So on behalf of our team and all of our guests, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope to see you here next week on March 11th for our episode, where we are going to discuss dissecting downtime, the impact of gender on rest. So have a great weekend, and we will see you next week.